We're doing an alternator change on this 08 Saturn View. It's the 3.6 liter. This alternator has in a really tough spot. It's way down in there. And so you got to take a few things off to get to it. And hopefully this will be a good video on how to do that. First things first, you want to take this cover off. I've already taken it off, but what you do is you just take the oil cap off, and then you just pull this right off. There's a couple grommets that are holding it in place. You just pull firmly, and then set it aside. Make sure and disconnect all battery connections before you start working, especially with the alternator, because the risk of shock is very high, and you could also get a spark out of it. So make sure you disconnect that first before any work is done on the car. Next is the air intake. You get a flathead, remove this, pull it off like that, pull the sensor off. You might have to get a flathead to wiggle that thing loose. Then you've got 4 Phillips head or flathead screws that go that hold this in place, hold the air filter in place. So you'll get one of those, a flathead, a big flathead preferably. You loosen them. I've already loosened them and taken them off. And then this pops right off. And typically the air filter sits right here, and you'll probably want to change that while you do this because it's not a convenient setup. So change what you can. You got 2 10mm bolts up here, and then you've got one real inconvenient 12mm bolt that's down in there. Now you'll have to use an open head or an open side of a wrench and work it around there until you finally get it out, but it is going to be a pain, so take your time and get that done. And once that's done, you should be able to just go ahead and pull it on out. Make sure this is clear out of your way. It slides right out like that. Now you've got 3 bolts up here that you'll take off. These are all 15mm. And we got some 18mm bolts down here. This is the engine mount, okay? You will need to put a jack underneath supporting the engine, not lifting it up. Do not lift it up with the jack. Just support the engine, because this is supporting the engine on this side. Once we take this off, it's going to be resting on the jack, and that's what you want. So just be very careful. Show extreme caution when you're doing things like this. There's the jack underneath that I have in place. I used a breakover bar, 1/2 inch, to break these things loose, and it gets far enough down there you can actually get some leverage on it. So this came in handy for that. I'm going to do these slowly because I don't know how much weight is on the jack quite yet. So I'm going to try and get these loose before I take them completely out. Alright, now we got 2 18mm bolts down here that we'll need to take out and break loose with that breaker bar. I'm not sure which angle I need to take. I don't know how I'm going to get it torqued. We might need an extension later on. Alright, now that all bolts are loose or taken off, you can pull it out. Keep all bolts where they go. You want them to go in the same hole. Just best that way. we still got 3 more bolts, one right here, and one over here. Okay, now we got to get the serpentine belt off. So we have the alternator down there. Everything's clear for it to come out. We just have 2 bolts in the front that we need to take care of, take them out. And then we will have a connector on this side that we'll need to take out. And a connector right here. I think that's a 13mm bolt right there that we'll have to loosen up. So let's go ahead and do that right now. We've got the front 2 bolts off the front. Now we just have 1 more on this pulley that you'll need to take out. It's not on very tight, so just loosen it and then you should be able to rock it out by hand. I'm going to use a wrench because this sucks. We've got the old one, the old alternator out and the new one in. I spared you guys the tugging and pulling that you're going to have to do. But what we did was we had that jack underneath the engine. We lifted it up very slowly and very slightly, very carefully until we had just enough clearance to wiggle it out. It'll come loose, you just got to get it just the right angle to get it out and get it back in. I found the best way to go was backwards, you know, so this end facing the other way went in best. But yeah, just take your time and get it in and out. I also disconnected this ground wire to the lights, the headlights, just to get it past that, so that might help you out a little bit too. So just a reminder to take your time. Put the engine mount bracket back on. These 3 bolts, they're 18 millimeters. They'll go back in at 81 foot-pounds. These are 15mm bolts that I have found best, works well with an extension on the torque wrench. I'm not quite sure what I'm going to torque these bolts to yet because they're smaller than the other ones, and the others went in, the 18mm ones went in at 81, and I couldn't quite find torque specs for this one, so I'm going to play it by ear, see how it goes. So, but just run these in, and I'm going to try probably about 65 foot-pounds and see how that feels. So, everything's back together, but one thing, we got kind of in a rush, and forgot to tell you that once, before you get the intake and all that stuff put back on, to save you the stress of not knowing whether everything's tight or not, go ahead and start it up so that you can see that the belt is tight and that all the bolts are tight and that the engine isn't vibrating anything loose or anything like that, and just give it a good test run then. It only needs to idle. You can also use that opportunity to take a multimeter to the battery and make sure that it's reading at least 14 volts or above to know that it's charging. And then once you know that it's fixed, you can put the intake back on and you'll be good to go. So